Hello everyone, welcome back for the Session 8 Conspiracy Board video. Well, let's jump into it. Once again, and probably as I said, for the rest of these videos it's going to be just me by myself. So yeah. So we'll start with video 80. And as obviously, because it came out later in the day, it'll end at video 91. So we have another 12 videos to cover. Even if video 80 is just more of me being tinfoil hatty, so we move on to video 81. It's another battle scene. Second area, Shibagaki City, battle number 2. It's immediately after the events of the previous battle at 8:51 p.m. on May 27th. Denji complains about the amount of flyers and laments being stuck on the ground. Yuki tells him to quit whining because she kinda wishes she was on the ground if it meant she could hit like a train. Rinya pipes up and says the 4th gens have some unique features, like the latest plasma weapons and interceptors, along with barriers and high-output laser weapons that didn't exist at the turn of the 22nd century. The rotors match the drill flies, and the barrier was taken from APSOS tech, so they were created by Okino, derived from the new Deimos designs. Takatoshi asks Okino if that's true, and he replies that he was just basically copy-pasting random design elements with no idea if anything would actually work, and since the Sentinels have always been kinda siblings to the Deimos. Battle then starts. After battle finishes, Ninji asks Sekigahara if he knows why. If they're attacking the mainframe from the terminals, it means that the terminals are weak points, so why the hell are there so many? A replies that the mainframe uses them to control and mainframe the city, so they're kinda laid out in a network like a massive nervous system. So the kaiju go after them. Iori asks if it's a UFO that will destroy the city, and Yuki pops up to say Iori doesn't know anything, and that it isn't even their city, and that it's only ever been a cage since they were born. Okay, so I need to move that. Let me do that again. I hit the wrong thing there. There we go. We can put you right up here. And we only need one string for that. 4th generation Sentinel. And somewhere in this mess, there you are. Okino developed that from the kaiju designs. Okay. Video 82, and this one's a long one. We see Iori, Tomi, and Miwako heading home in the Keiyakicho shopping district. Tomi complains about the pop quizzes, and Miwako asks if her grade was actually that bad. Tomi says she never had class on Saturdays, and Miwako says that actually sounds pretty damn good. Tomi reminds her that her grade wasn't that great either, and Miwako asks to kind of stop talking about it because she was going to study, but then she turned on the TV, and Tomi continues to say they still give too many tests. Iori muses that it was 2089 in her dream, and that he'd gone back 16 years to find her. So if that was real, something will happen in the year 2105, 120 years in the future. Tomi continues the earlier conversation and said she thought this school would be easier than her old one, and Miwako asks where she went. Tomi deflects by calling it pretty similar, and says the best cure for the blues is good eats, pointing out the bakery and calling out that their hot dogs are actually good. Miwako says if they're talking about meat, then she wants Nikuman. Tomi turns and asks Iori which one she wants. The two girls promote their choices while Iori thinks, and then she decides to go get some Nikuman, which is kind of a meat bun, because it's a little chilly that day. Tomi agrees and the screen fades to black as they walk off. It fades back in as the three return to the shopping district with the Nikaman in hand. They eat the meat bun with Iori making a rather odd sound as she does. If you heard it, you probably remember it. It's on my soundboard in my Discord even. The trio talk about how good the food is, with Tomi making a joke about using them on a date to shove down your shirt to become instant Morimura. Tomi then says she saw a weird show on TV last night from the Explorers series, and asks if they know what it is because she watched the whole thing, only to be left with more questions than answers. Miwako says yeah, it's usually like that, and she knows because the boys in class were talking about it, but she usually watches the music show at that time. Tomi says the top hits today remind her of old times, and Miwako thinks it's different because the top hits are trending more towards pop these days. Miwako asks Tomi if she's into music, and Tomi says more into singing it than just listening to it. Miwako is surprised Tomi can sing and asks what type of songs. Tomi stalls for an answer because she says it's hard to explain, and Miwako asks if that's because it's foreign. Tomi says not exactly, and Miwako does not understand. Tomi says it doesn't exist yet, so don't worry about it, while Miwako asks her why she's being like this. The girls are still hungry, so this time Iori decides to go get hot dogs. Yes, we just ate meat buns, now we're going to go get a different type of meat bun. Go figure. The scene, once again, fades to black as they go get food and fades back in when they return. They scarf these down without the weird noises and talk about how good and spicy the hot dogs were. Tomi takes pride in being mature enough to handle spice, and Iori brings her back down to earth by pointing out that she has chili sauce on her mouth. Miwako points out that Iori looks sleepy and asks if she's okay. Tomi asks what she means, and Miwako says that Iori collapsed in the science room, and Miwako took her to the nurse's office. Tomi then remembers being told that, and Iori thanks her for going with. Miwako says Rinya helped by carrying her to the office, and Iori stops to recall the scene to a fade out. We go to event 54 on the timeline. We fade into the flashback inside the science room. Iori looks to be finishing up sweeping, and she walks over to tell Juro he did good work, but his concentration on the door prompts her to ask what's wrong. He tells her the door won't open despite having a key ring Rinya gave him, and none of the keys are opening the door to that storage room. She asks what they can do with all the equipment, and Juro suggests leaving it, but she says they can't, and says she'll just get the key from the teacher's lounge, adding that Juro can go back to class. As she leaves the room, Juro says she may be in the same grade, but she talks to him like an older sister. The scene then fades out. It fades back into Iori's return, where she muses that the building is old and quiet, making it feel a bit creepy. She unlocks a storage room, and a green flash behind her startles her. She asks who's there, and getting no answer, she looks around the room, calling out for whoever it is there to come out. The screens of the terminal activate, and she approaches them, and as she approaches them, they shift her, with a fade to black. We fade in to Iori laying in a bed in the nurse's office with Miwako, Rinya, and Nurse Morimura standing over her. Iori sits up, Morimura acknowledges it, Miwako expresses relief that she's okay, and then says she was found laying on the floor. Morimura adds that she was unconscious, and both Morimura and Rinya ask if she's alright. Iori quickly gets up despite Miwako's protest not to push herself, and Morimura adds that she should stay in bed. Iori asks how she got there, and Miwako says Rinya found her and carried her there. She asks if he was in the burning city too, and he says he has no idea what she's talking about as she collapsed in the science room. She asks if he saw any weird flashing screens while he was in there, and he says there was nothing of the sort, so it must have been a dream. She tells Miwako she saw the burning city from her dreams, and when Miwako asks if it was a dream, she says she was actually there. Miwako tries to reassure that it was just a dream, but she's convinced it was real as she starts to recall it, causing all three of them to act kind of suspiciously, and she adds she saw him there at the burning city, and they fade out. We fade back in to Event 55 on the timeline. We are now in the destroyed city of Sector 2. She wonders where she is, because it's just like the city from her dreams. She walks down the ruined street to see Sekigahara standing there. She approaches him and he pulls his phaser out to aim at her and tells her no sudden moves. She asks if that's a gun, and he asks who she is. She says she's Iori, and he replies that he knows that much, and asks who ordered her to come there. She acts confused, says she just saw a flash in the science room, with the next thing she knew being that she was where she is now, and she doesn't know where there is. A accepts she may not actually know anything, so he holsters the phaser. He tells her that this is Ashitaba City in 2065. He says that if the gate reacted to her, then she's one of the 15, but she also managed to unlock the gate, which can only be unlocked with Morimura's ID. So it's as he suspected, Iori is the real Morimura. She hears the name and asks if he means her teacher. She then asks how the city was destroyed, the area shakes, and A replies that they're safe at their distance as a G-Molar travels by in the far background. She asks what that is, A replies to Deimos, and she asks if he means like in the Kaiju movies. He says it's not a bad comparison, except that this is just a machine. She seems to trance out a bit, says they appear in droves, hell-bent on destroying the world, which means it won't be long before they take over her own town. A grabs her shirt and asks how she knows so much, and she tells him not to get the wrong idea, she just saw this in a dream. He questions this, and says the monster was wrecking the city and coming for her, so she ran for her life. She then said there were other dreams where people talked about monsters, but maybe those weren't dreams after all. She muses about the dreams and remembers Rinyu was there as they ran for their lives. She wonders when she got so obsessed with boys that they just start to show up in her dreams. She tells A that her dreams have been so strange, maybe they've been premonitions. He asks what about her other dreams are like, and she starts to talk about the buried UFO dream, where she was in a UFO after the city was destroyed, and another dream where she escaped to the past on her own, and wonders if those were real. A says Morimura told him the same stories, and ponders the dream possibility. She then asks who he is, and the sound of small rotors flying by is heard. A asks if she hears it, and a BJ-style drone comes into view. A pulls out his phaser and shoots it. He says there's no choice and tells her to come with him. And at that moment, a Sentinel rises up from next to the ruined stream. Its eye flashes, and it gives us a screen transition. We fade back in to see the Sentinel inactive, Iori collapsed on the ground, and A nowhere in sight. Rinyu comes in from off-screen and checks on the unconscious Iori. He grumbles about A getting away when a window with Chihiro in a catsuit pops up, asking Rinyu if he found number 8. She said yes, and that it had been taken over by the Deimos. She said it seems risky to send units out autonomously, so she'll restore manual control to 8, so he should shut it down. He tells her Sekigahara was there, but he got away, and Morimura expresses surprise he was even in the sector. Rinyu then points out Iori's prone form, and points out that she's a student from Sector 4, the same class as Kisaragi. Morimura tells him to bring her back. To be continued. Okay. And none of these are special. I do need 6 of them. We've got more food, even though it's not as special as the food. You get to go all the way over there. Actually, just to get out of the way. So let's see. Well, we do have some more food here because food is a thing. Yeah, the hot dog. Even though that wasn't the first thing we did there. Fortunately, that's all the food we've got. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your view of the food focus in many parts of this game. There's also a bunch of strings I'm gonna have to put in here. So we're gonna have a couple of minutes before we actually get to the next recap here. D15. There we go. I grabbed one too many, didn't I? No? I did not get to one too many. I just, for some reason, didn't actually do the thing. I was too concerned with something else. Okay, so let's see. First, we get a whole bunch of things here for Nika Man. Let's see, then we've got 3 for the hot dog. Just making that a little easier. Then we've got 2 at 214. The science room gate. Let's see. We've got 1 that's at 215 to 216 melee here. 15 that can activate the gate, and kind of a generic, yeah, I know it's generic, but you know, it's 217 has 1 all by itself there. Warhammer's ID. 6 of them are going on the 15 here. Not counting the one I already put on there. Seven, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And then 2. Okay, yep, that's all those strings. Then there are 2 more. If the website will let me grab more. I mean, I can fully understand the website going, "You've had enough." Are going on to Sentinel number 8 over here. So let's see, Sentinel number 8. Number 13. Sentinel number 8 was taken over by the Dymos. And where are you buried in here somewhere? Very deep. And Rinya managed to recapture the thing. Okay. And now first, we have a whole bunch of thing. I'm gonna manage to get in here. There we go. I pulled the Yoris out. After that I need Miwako and Tomi, just so I can see these things. Okay. Oh, Yori had herself a hot dog. She had herself some Nikamen. Tomi had herself a hot dog. Tomi had some Nikamen. Miwako also. And these strings were specifically numbered. There would also be a couple in there about who suggested them. But let's see this gate. Let's see, both Rinya and Iori managed to activate that particular gate. 15 here is a fairly long list, but the 15 that we know of. Let's see, we got one is Iori, one is Rinya, let's see, we know Tsukasa can activate one. We know Tsukasa's one of the 15 because he can activate a gate. And 4, I didn't pull 4 up, but there it is right there. A is also one of the 15. Let's see. Who else? Who else did I have listed down? Oh yeah. BJ, right over here. Also one of the 15, because he can activate the gates. And then Morimaru's ID specifically can activate it. And Morimaru's ID is something Iori has. Seriously, that is just going to be one big freaking black blob in the middle by the time we're done. So we move on to video 83. We are at event 19 on the timeline. Iori's next chapter starts in 2097 on the Sumire Bridge. Excuse me. Chihiro in a cat suit approaches an injured Juro Izumi and says she won't let him get away this time. He says it's the her of 16 years ago and is disappointed that she is not aware of what happened. She asks what happened and he says they were in love and they struggled to save the world together. She says it was all for nothing and he argues they did at least find the truth. This is but one small part of a massive operation, but it would be lost on her if he tried to explain now. He tells her the plan needs to be revised and she needs to let him go. She pulls her phaser and they point guns at each other, and she asks if he'll be taking even more lives as he's killed the 4 that came with him. He says she misunderstands and he backed his data up in Sector 0 before the final battle, as that was all he could do and he doesn't know what happened to the others. She counters by saying Ida said otherwise, and Juro just kind of grunts at that. She says she can't trust anything he says, and he replies the 25-year-old Morimura felt differently, that she'd loved him since the day they met, and he can't imagine that really changed. He asked her to open the way, and she replies that she can't as she shoots him. She calls out his name as she crouches over the body, and we fade to black. Fade back into event 78 on the timeline and the 1985 school class 1B where Iori is asleep at her desk again. She wakes up and muses over the cute guy she met in the dream, dismissing that it was just a dream because she had butterflies in her stomach when she saw him. She thinks and realizes that she needs to go back to the science room to try to meet him again. She thinks about the monster dreams, where they lost the fight and ran away as a monster chased them, and Rinya was there with her. She wonders when she got so obsessed with boys to the point they're in her dreams. This is starting to sound a little bit repetitive. And she thinks about getting back in the science room, but it's locked, so she'll need the key. Meanwhile, Tomi and Miwako are talking. Miwako asks Tomi about being absent the other day, and Tomi claims she had a stomach ache, but she's fine now. Miwako mentions that Ninji was also absent on the same day, wondering if maybe they spent the day together, and Tomi tells her to stop jumping to conclusions, but Miwako was kidding as she already asked Ninji and he was on the trip. Iori interrupts and Tomi welcomes her back to the land of the living, and sleeping as much as Iori does is a real talent. Miwako says she saw Iori nodding off the whole time and the teacher was glaring again. Iori overhears a couple of students talking as they look at the chore chart, and one says he's been assigned to clean the science room, which is a drag, but luckily he's sharing the cleaning duty with the cute girl Miwako. She approaches Miwako and says she has a favor to ask, and they fade to black. We fade back in to event 79 on the timeline, where I need to stop doing things that mess up my list here. We are now in the science room where Miwako tells Iori to be safe as the chemicals are dangerous. Iori says to relax, and she'll be sure to lock up when she's done. Miwako takes the trash out as she leaves. Iori starts walking around the room, trying to get the gate to activate, and stops where she recalls things started to pop up. She ducks down behind a few of the desks in the immediate area to no effect as she grows increasingly frustrated, and the scene fades to black as she continues searching. The scene fades back in, and out of desperation she yells out, "Open Sesame," to which a computerized voice matches her voice print and authorizes the senior admin ID. The screens pop up around them and she stares at them for a moment before trying to press a few buttons and being transported where it fades to black. We fade back in to event 80 on the timeline and the interior of the UFO, where we can see an inactive android at the edge of the transporter. She thinks this is the UFO from her dream and sees two more inactive androids nearby. Talking so much is making me yawn. She walks around a bit and examines everything, focusing on one computer terminal. She then hears footsteps and goes to hide in the shadow of one of the androids. Ryoko walks in, saying that someone is still after her. Iori recognizes her, and Ryoko examines one of the androids, saying that it's no good as 426 must have shot it, so she needs to retreat and she starts to activate the gate. Sekigahara runs in from off screen and asks why she keeps running from him, and she tells him to stay back and calls him 426. He groans about repeating that again and says she needs to give it a rest as there's not much time left. He begs her to come with him as he can protect her, and she cries out in pain from her headaches and tells him to stop confusing her before turning around and finishing her shift out of there. Iori stands up in disbelief as she thinks A is in love with Ryoko. He hears her and calls for her to identify herself. She walks forward and he calls her by name, asks if she's alone and what she's doing there. She says she wanted to see if it was a dream and she thinks it was. He tells her she shouldn't be there and she needs to go back to her sector. He says he'll send her himself as he turns around and activates the gate. So with that, not a lot of new information for us. We're largely getting, a whole bunch of stuff. Largely getting a whole bunch of confirmation of things. But we did learn that Ryoko can also activate the gates. So she is indeed one of the 15. That's Yuki. There you are. Okay. Sorry, had to pause it there for a second, and I don't know what you mean, nothing changed. Video 84 begins with event 108 on the timeline, where we open to see what looks like a kind of sad Iori standing near Tomi at the school's front gate. Tomi mentions that Miwako was taken while delivering some papers to the art room. Tomi asks why Iori looks bummed, and she says she's fine. Iori asks if they're going to Sutsuji, and Tomi says yes, as Miwako wanted to stop by the record store, and Iori remembers she wanted the New Idols album. Miwako runs in from off-screen and apologizes for keeping them waiting, as she saw Natsuno and was about to make a comment, but Tomi cuts her off by announcing the bus's arrival. The three rush to get on the bus, and she drives off in a fade to black. We fade back into event 110 in the timeline, and it's now 7:38 p.m., where the Sutsuji station and the Sutsuji board of Shiroyashio-cho is nighttime, but the many buildings keep the place light. The girls are on a street corner, and Tomi remarks that the sun's already gone down. Miwako apologizes because she took so long, but Iori apologizes because they couldn't get the record she was looking for. Miwako was annoyed that all three stores were sold out. Tomi repeats that it's getting late, and Iori says her father's a worrywart, so she needs to call home, so Miwako points out a phone booth. Tomi asks if she's going to call, Iori says yes, and goes to use the phone booth. A very brief call with her father later, Tomi asks how it went, and Iori says pretty much as expected, and her dad wants her home as soon as possible. Tomi then points out that the train is probably fastest, so they start to head that way. Then they spot Wajima lurking on the street in their path. Miwako remembers him as the bully from before, and Iori explains to Tomi that he was harassing them by the school gate last week. Tomi asks if Iori's okay, and Miwako says that Ninji stepped in and saved them. Tomi expresses some surprise at that, and the three of them decide to try to go around him to reach the station. Tomi also recalls that she saw other people like Wajima hanging around the school lately, where they then head off the other way and run into Detective Onishi, who starts to reprimand them for being out so late and asking what school they're from. He introduces himself, and Miwako explains he's going to take them into custody. Onishi then guesses that they're from Sakura High based on their outfits and asks why they're out at 8 p.m. Iori tells him they went record shopping and it got too late before they realized it. He reminds them that it's dangerous for young girls to be out on the street at night no matter what reason, so they apologize, with him telling him the next time it happens he'll write them up, and barks at them to hurry on home as he walks away. Tomi almost sounds giddy as she asks if this means they're now juvenile delinquents. They try to walk the other way, only to see Wajima's lackey standing in that direction. Tomi suggests making a break for the station, and when they try, Wajima blocks her path. He tells the three that it must be destiny they meet again, so he knows the perfect place to show her a good time. Onishi approaches the disturbance, causing Wajima to panic, and Onishi chases him off with threats of a trip downtown. Iori thanks Onishi, and then runs for the station in a fade to black. We fade back into event 111, where we are now in a back alley, and Iori and Miwako are surrounded by Wajima and his lackeys, after they ambush the trio at the station and force them into the alley. Iori tells them they won't get away with it as the police are on their way, and one of the lackeys interrupts her to tell them Wajima has something to say. Wajima goes full incel and says his luck with women has been bad his whole life, but the moment he saw Iori, he knew she'd be his. The lackeys cheer him on as Iori starts to beg him to stop, but Sekigahara shows up, saying he generally minds his own business, but they kinda need to leave the girls alone, and tells them to leave. Wajima asks who he is and if he's just a poser. Sekigahara calls him hard of hearing, and that he can't say he didn't warn him. A fade to black with impact marks and grunting later, Wajima and his lackeys roll on the ground while A stands in the middle of them. Wajima complains that A is a boxer, and A says he's a tad rusty as they actually got hits in. Iori asks why he was there, and he calls it mere coincidence, but Iori thinks he's lying. A snaps his head up and says they must have heard the commotion before rushing off. Tomi runs on screen with Onishi in tow and asks if they're okay. Okishi asks Wajima to explain what happened, and Iori tells Tomi she feels much better with the policeman there. Tomi childs her about being too slow and not just bolting past the ticket gate before asking exactly how they managed to take care of Wajima and his lackeys. Miwako says that a cool guy came in and saved them, and Tomi asks if she meant the guy that was running downtown, to which Miwako confirms. Tomi's glad they're okay, and they can finally go home and leave the rest of the cop. Iori ponders on what she needs to do, and decides she needs to run after A. As she runs off, a man in black says it must be him and follows her. We fade to black. We fade back in to event 112 on the timeline, where we see Iori run back into the street corner from earlier looking for A. She walks around until she finds the guy with the same haircut and approaches him, but it turns out to be someone else. As she moves around, the man in black from earlier starts staking out the street. She's just about to give up the search and then sees A in the phone booth nearby. She approaches him, and he asks if she followed him, and she says she has something to tell him. He stops her and says if she's seen with him, the men in black will be after her, too. She's confused and tells her he's being hunted just before he runs off. Iori realizes the man in black she saw earlier is one of the ones hunting A, and she follows in the direction A ran off to, only to find the man in black holding A by the arm. The MIB tells him not to even think of drawing that gun here, and Iori basically says, "Hey, hold my beer," and body tackles the MIB and knocks him out. As she stands up and A looks at the fallen MIB, a second one shows up to grab Iori by the arm and tells A he's not getting away. Iori begs for A to save himself and run. Yuki then shows up and asks what's going on, and the MIB asks Yuki to give him a hand. She asks if women and children are fair game and smacks him with her bag, telling him she doesn't stand for that. A's motorcycle drives up and announces it has arrived at its destination. A mounts up, yells at Iori to get on. She does, and the scene fades to black. We fade back into event 113 on the timeline, and now we are on the Suwabuki Bypass motorway as the pair of them drive along. Sekigahara says the girl seemed to be associated with the MIBs, but Iori couldn't recognize her because it was too dark. A tells her to hold on a little tighter because she's at risk of falling. She nervously accepts the offer and asks where he asks where she lives so he can take her home. She then says to herself it's now or never and tells him she knows that it's sudden, but she needs to tell him she loves him. He asks why is this happening all of a sudden, or if this is just one of this year's ideas of pranks. She says it's not, and that she knows he already has Ryoko, so it's awkward to hear it from her. But even if it breaks her heart, she had to let him know how she felt. He decides to clarify that Ryoko's not exactly his girlfriend, and that he spent a lot of time alone as a kid because his parents weren't around, so Ryoko just kind of stepped in and looked after him like a big sister, so she's kind of like family to him. So he does care for her, but not in the exact same way she's thinking, and he's really just looking for her to be happy. Iori asks if he means it, and he continues that middle school was rough, and he hadn't heard anything about love for a while, until now. He remarks that the two of them seem bound by fate and asks what she would do if he told her he was an assassin from the future that came there to kill her. She says it wouldn't matter and she'd still love him. He questions her loving a guy she doesn't even know the name of. She replies yes and asks if she does really feel that strongly, that he didn't see it coming. He introduces himself and she repeats his name and says she hasn't heard an "oh" yet. He tells her he needs to get her home and asks her to stop following him and that he'll be in touch. We fade out to be continued. So yeah, not a whole lot new going on here. Actually grab the dots. Or if I can actually get the name of the card on there, that would be good. Being able to get the name of the card on here would actually be kind of a positive thing. So Sekigahara's motorcycle here. Yeah, somewhere right here. So obviously, since it's his motorcycle. And the mystery key can indeed summon this motorcycle. There we go. That is video 84. So video 85 begins, well, in the ruins of Kayaki-cho with Tomi Miwako. Miwako welcomes Tomi back, and Tomi asks if Ryoko woke up. Miwako shakes her head no, and Ninji runs back in screen. Miwako asks when all this happened, they were at school, so why don't they try going there? Ninji asks if that would help, and Miwako says that's where they time slipped from, so maybe there's a clue on how to get back. Tomi says she may be onto something, as Morimura was always there, so maybe there's a time machine there. Tomi asks if she means a teacher, and Ninji recalls her as a nurse with big knockers. Tomi says Morimura came from even farther in the future than she did. Ninji then hands them both a candy bar and says he found some at a convenience store, but he's not really a candy guy. Oh, lets them have it. Tomi tells him he should eat too, and he says he's done worse. He adds that there isn't much they can do from where they are, and if they're going to go anywhere, they need to go before it gets dark. Tomi agrees, but needs to rest for a little bit. Ninji complains that they have to do something, and suggests burning something to send smoke up so that overhead planes might be able to see him. Tomi muses about the dead kaiju and wonders if Morimura and Megami were going to fight that type of thing. She then readies herself and tells Ninji they're going to head to the school. He asks if they're going to leave Ryoko behind, and Miwako offers to stay behind while they go, so they leave to a fade out. We fade in to event 67 on the timeline, a different part of the ruined city, with Ninji complaining that Tomi's going to trip if he keeps running like she is due to all the rough roads. Tomi turns and mockingly says how cool he's acting. He adds it took him a little while to get there with the blocked road, and some people have their eyes on the time. They continue down the road and see the broken form of Sentinel 13, left from when Jiro Izumi burned out from piloting it for 2 hours. Ninji asks if that's a kaiju, and Tomi recognizes number 13 that fought to protect the city. Ninji's surprised that there are kaiju fighting robots now, and says the future's wild, but even then, the robot didn't win in the end. He looks at the completely destroyed road and says they're kind of up a creek, and Tomi realizes that the road's nothing but rubble. Ninji says even if they climb down and try to continue, the other side looks just as bad, so they look like they're going to have to take the long way around. Tomi wants to get on with it if she's worried about Miwako. Then she recalls when she last saw Sentinel 13, and we fade to black and fade in to event 40 on the timeline. We see Tomi in a Kamazumi Ward commercial building in 2025. Tomi explains that she's not there either, and Rinya asks her not to trouble him further and tells her they have to evacuate. She replies she's not leaving without her mom. He says she must, as she's the only capable one, and the Deimos invasion has already started, and begs her to listen to him. She replies with an emphatic no, as they're already within the attack range. Rinya is surprised by a sound and turns to see a sentinel walk by the window. He claims it's too soon for deployment when Jiro Izumi transmits his image to them, saying he's going to take him on. Rinya asks what he's doing piloting it, and he replies there's no one else that can pilot it but him. Jiro adds he's sorry to rush them, but time is short, and Tomi says she'll go when she finds her mom. Tomi starts to run off when Chihiro in a catsuit shows up and tranquilizes her, telling Rinya there's a change of plans, that Izumi has made his choice, and his nanomachines aren't going to hold much longer. They have to begin the test now or they'll miss their chance, so the evacuation can wait. She tells Rinya to bring the girl over, and we hit to be continued. However, we open back up in the same exact spot as before. When we come back, Tomi runs into the building and Miwako rushes to meet her, yelling about something being bad. Ninji follows Tomi in, asking what's up. Miwako says that Ryoko is gone, and says she only looked away for a second and asks Tomi what to do. Tomi rushes back to the bed to confirm, sees it empty, and realizes Ryoko wasn't exactly in the best of shape, so she couldn't have gotten far. Tomi runs back to the two and says she couldn't have gotten far, so they need to split up and look around. Ninji says he'll check across the street and rushes off, and Miwako says she might have gone to the shopping district and rushes off that way. Tomi starts to rush off as the scene fades to black. The scene fades back in front of the building they all started with all three of them standing there. Miwako still calls out for Ryoko to answer, and Ninji can only assume she managed to make it much further than they all thought. Tomi says they need to check the school, as Ryoko might have had the same thought. Ninji agrees, adding the schools all the way around the bend, and they tell Miwako to wait there and they'll be back in a jiffy. The two head off to the school as the scene fades to black. We fade back in to event 168 on the timeline, where we are now at... we fade into Yamaki and Sakura High School, where the pair stands on one side of what looks like a canyon with the school on the other side across the gap. Ninji says the north building is just completely gone, and Tomi adds the schoolyard is all caved in. She turns and points out a quad walker in the pit, and Ninji asks if that's another construction machine. Tomi says it probably dug the pit they're seeing, and Ninji asks why, wondering if they're trying to make a nest or something. Tomi asks if that thing was meant for planetary development, so why would it dig up a hole for no reason? Maybe there's something down underground. Ninji asks what could be down there, like maybe more dirt, and Tomi retorts that she is just saying. Ninji says they can write this place off because no one's here, but Tomi says to keep looking, and Ninji gets a surprised look on his face and says, "Speak of the devil." The pair see Ryoko kneeling on the road, surrounded by inactive androids. They move to approach her and stop the first android, asking if that might be the same one as before. The androids spring to life, prompting Tomi and Ninji to run, but another android approaches from off-screen to cut off the escape. Soon after, we hear 3 gunshots, and all 3 androids approaching the pair fall over. The shooter turns out to be Sekigahara, who mumbles something about it serving them right. The pair approach him, thank him, and ask who he is. He introduces himself, calls her out as Tomi Kisaragi, and says he didn't know if any of them were left. He asks if they're the only ones there, so they turn to point out Ryoko, but she has disappeared. Ninji expresses his disbelief as Tomi rationalizes she must have run from the androids. They ask A if he's with Morimura, and he says maybe, and they point out that he's got to be from the future. He confirms, calling it quite a ways into the future. Ninji demands to know how he knows Tomi, and a drone then flies out overhead. Tomi starts to call it out, and A finishes her thought of what it is by calling it a drone and a probe that found them on patrol. He again states that he didn't expect to find those two out here. Tomi remarks about the drone telling him about them, and he apologizes for them getting caught up in this mess, but it's time for them to get to the underground gate so he can take them there. He adds that he thought they would have returned already since Ryoko was with them, and all the gates above ground are locked, so he's been stuck there. He continues to add that underground is the primary shifter so that all other gates connect to it from afar, as they are just access points. She perks up at the mention of underground and asks him if he means where the quadwalker was digging. He confirms this as the scene fades to black with a "to be continued." Okay. That being video 85. We need 1 new card. For the Battle of 2025. And then to highlight Juro so I can find him again in a second. It's Juro. Was one of the few who actually fought in the Battle of 2025. So video 86 brings us all the way back to Yuki, back on her very familiar rooftop by now. She wonders why Ryoko forgot that she even told Yuki to hide the box in the first place, that Shikishima had a massive weapon, and whatever Rinya and Ryoko said doesn't seem to make any sense, so they probably let her go so they could track her, and that she needs to take a closer look at the box, but she has to get rid of Aiba first. Erika Aiba walks up behind Yuki and says she's been looking for her. Yuki tells Aiba that she's done investigating and has other things to do. The scene fades to black. We move on to event 140 in the timeline. We fade in to see Yuki standing in the old school building, where she remarks that it just kind of smells like mold. She enters the classroom and exits a few moments later with the box, which is the BJ drone. She knows it can project things and tries to figure out how Ryoko made it work. She then adds that it looks like a box and muses that it's what Natsuno was hiding. She could show it to the track girl. A man in black runs in the corridor and congratulates her on getting the drone from him, as there's valuable confidential information in there. She's confused, and he clarifies he means the data unit and asks if she had orders to look for it as well. She asks what the guy meant, and he's surprised she hasn't heard, and he walked in there because he thought he saw the guy naming Sekigahara, a vicious criminal that will stop at nothing to get his hands on that information. The camera pans back to reveal A standing there with a gun drawn, and he replies, "Oh, I don't think I'm that bad," before pulling the trigger and shooting the man in black. He then recognizes Yuki and puts the gun away before crouching next to the box and examining it. Yuki crouches next to the downed MIB and tries to wake him. Then A says he didn't kill him, he just knocked him out. She stands and tells him hands off to get away from her box. He asks if she even knows what that is, and she mumbles something about it being confidential. He gives the command to activate AI, and the BJ unit then springs to life, and he asks Miura if he recognizes him. BJ calls him Sekigahara. A is relieved that BJ got his memory back, and BJ asks where he is. A replies they're in Sector 4 at the old Sakura High School building, to which BJ says there's a problem, as Natsuno was left behind. Yuki asks if she heard that name correctly, and asks BJ to clarify if he knows where Natsuno is. BJ asks who she is, and she replies with her name, but says it doesn't matter and just to tell her where she is. He clarifies he does mean Natsuno Minami, and per his last memory, she's marooned in Sector 3. Yuki is confused at the terminology, and A says she'll understand when they get there. He tells BJ he knows a shortcut, and asks Yuki if she's coming with, to which she emphatically replies yes, and they exit the hallway to a fade to black. We fade back into event 141 in the timeline, to the trio arriving at the Tokisaka Shrine. Yuki says she knew it was important, as Natsuno went there too. BJ begins a sequence to activate the gate. Yuki asks what's going on, and if this is Sector 3. And A says not to move as BJ gets the gate up and executes a shift to Sector 3. We fade to black. We fade back in. It is still the same event despite the different setting. We are now at the same ruined building in 2025 that Tomi, Miwako, and Ninji were using as a base. Yuki asks where they are and where Natsuno is. A wonders where she could have gone, and Yuki pulls out the notebook and is in disbelief the time travel notebooks were real. She asks how long Natsuno's been stranded there, and A replies that canned food isn't that hard to find if you look, so as long as she didn't do anything reckless, she should still be fine. Yuki asks what happened to where they are, and A says it was the Deimos attack. At her confusion about the term, he clarifies it's a swarm of machines that look like monsters. They don't leave survivors, and the next target is her town. He continues that the only chance of surviving is to fight back with the Sentinels. That could work, she recognizes, and he tells her they need her for this, which makes her ask if she really has to get in one of those things. He's surprised she's seen one, and she says she saw number 14 in Shikishima's facility. He says that's Ryoko's Sentinel, then spots BJ returning. Yuki asks what he found, and he says he scanned for heat sources from the air but detected no signs within a 5-kilometer range. He says they may need to prepare for the worst case scenario, and she tells him to shut his mouth. He replies that if she's still alive, she must have moved deep inside the building or farther away. BJ says he'll widen the scan range, and it says to be continued. And we don't have any new cards or streams from that one. And after a quick pause, yes, I pause between most of these videos just to give my throat a quick rest, since it is just me talking with nothing else. We're now at video 87. We jump back into Keitaro's story at the typical riverbank. He thinks about BJ and how it's not exactly an ordinary scout unit, then how Natsuno can apparently time travel, and he should probably see her because she seems to be a central figure in everything. He walks off to go look for her and fade to black. We fade into a sunset at the front gate to the high school. Megami walks by, greets him, then makes sure he knows where the track room is before asking if he's seen Juro. Keitaro has not, so she guesses he might have gone home and wonders aloud what to make for dinner. Keitaro recommends Himburger, and she replies they've had kinda nothing but meat the past few days, so she thinks he'll make some fish, because fish apparently is not meat, and needs to run to the store, and does. Keitaro heads off to the track room, and we fade to black. We fade into Event 120 to the athletics building, where the track captain sees him and informs him that Natsuno is not there today, and whatever kept her must be important because she missed practice. The assistant asks Keitaro if he's her boyfriend, and the captain follows up with asking how far they've gone, and he stammers out that they've gotten it all wrong. While they talk, Ryoko watches in partial cover. He asked the track squad where she might have gone, but all she told them was that she was in a hurry. But the assistant then said she went to Tokisaka Shrine, but doesn't know what she's up to, as she didn't really ask. On hearing that, Ryoko pulls out some type of ninja vanish maneuver, and he and Keitaro realizes that's where he met her back in his own time, so he heads off to the shrine, and we fade to black. We fade back into Event 121 on the timeline, to Keitaro approaching the shrine, which he notes hasn't really changed much at all, but boy, the surrounding thicket sure has. He looks around and wonders if Natsuno's hiding behind trees, as he doesn't see her. As he stands around looking, Natsuno and BJ shift in, with her saying they couldn't find it, so they don't know where it could be. Keitaro calls her name, and in surprise she spins around and asks what he's doing out so late, and why he's at the shrine. He counters that by asking her what it was he just saw, meaning the big flash of light that was the same as when his Sentinel jumped through time. He then realizes that this also happened at the shrine when they first met, and he thinks he gets it, that they have to go there to travel through time. He asks her to tell him what's going on because he just wants to go home. Natsuno asks BJ what they should do, and BJ asks if she's just going to leave his Sentinel, with Natsuno asking what he'll do with it. She then asks if he's dead set on going home, and he says that he'll deal with the Sentinel later, because if there's any chance his sister made out of there alive, he has to go find out. She says that makes sense and asks BJ to make it happen. BJ concedes and opens up the gate to Sector 5, shifting them all there. Ryoko approaches the scene when they're gone, realizing that Natsuno had the data unit the whole time. Fade to black. We fade back into Event 152 on the timeline. What did I just say? Did I say Event 152? I don't know. Event 122. Of course, I was looking at something else when I said that. Make sure I didn't just screw something up because I accidentally clicked and dragged something I shouldn't have. Okay. Event 122, we fade back in. We're now in the 1945 Tokisaka Shrine, and the three shift into view. He asks if that's that easy to travel through time, and she says it's pretty cool. He asks if they can just travel through time this easily, and if they can just do it this easily, why can't he just send the Sentinel back to before the war started? But she says that's impossible, because the jumps can only happen in increments of 40 years, and not whatever point in time they want to go to. So this is as far back in the past as they can go. He considers this unfortunate, so they need to focus on finding Chihiro. Natsuno packs up BJ, and Kitaro says that she's likely either at a shelter or at the Kurabe's house. They then head off to search as it fades to black. It fades back into event 123, where the group arrives at the ruins of the area around the Kurabe house, where kaiju have already seemed to be completely inactive all over the background, and he wonders why this place is completely deserted, with the factory and station empty and the radios are all down. Natsuno points out the kaiju and asks if Keitaro sees it. Keitaro recognizes it as the monsters he fought earlier, and Natsuno calls it an alien weapon sent to invade Earth that the Sentinels were created to fight. And this is exactly what happened to the city in the future, where everyone was gone when the aliens invaded. She wonders if people are disappearing in the past. What's happening if people are disappearing in the past? What's happening to people in her era? He thinks for a second and realizes that the kaiju aren't secret American weapons after all, but they are aliens, as Natsuno says. He looks around and sees Tamao Kurabe laying on the ground. He rushes to her and checks on her, and BJ pops up and declares her vital signs are failing, with her condition too critical for life support. Kitaro asks where Chihiro is, and Tamao barely gets out that Chihiro was, and it cuts to a flashback. We fade out and fade in to event 95, where we see Tamao, already struggling with severe smoke inhalation, watches Rinya carrying a struggling Chihiro away. She asks what he's doing, and he asks Chihiro to calm down. Tamao asks where he plans to take her, and he apologizes for what he had to do to her, but she has no reason to worry. She begs him to wait as she runs off with Chihiro. We return to the previous event, 123, as the flashback ends, and Keitaro recognizes the name Goto as the one that was giving her medicine. Tamao dies, and her body just kind of vanishes. BJ says that Universal Control has shifted her. Natsuno asks if that means the aliens got her, and BJ says probably, and it's likely that everyone is being held there until the world comes to an end. This scene fades away, with a to be continued. Let's see. Tamao died in that scene. And Universal Control was likely the one that shifted the corpse. Gruesome as that sounds. Video 88 begins with Sekigahara at night in the Tsutsuji station we saw Iori and her friends in earlier. He walks into the screen and thinks he finally lost them, but he'll have to consider his next moves carefully. He muses about the android that created the pills and notes that she was different than when he saw her at the school. He considers that DD-426 is the root of his memory loss, but wonders who created it and why. The communicator he's carrying around starts sounding off with the voice that's been talking to him, and asks him to respond. A decides to answer, asking what it wants. He replies that he seems to have found his way into school grounds, but you shouldn't wander around unless he wants to get caught. It asks what business he had there, and he replied that he wanted to learn more about the person he killed. The voice apologizes for not being transparent and asks if anyone saw him there. He replies no, and the voice trusts him because partners don't lie to each other. E questions if they're really partners, and the voice replies that they're working together to save everyone. A asks if that includes the one he murdered, and the voice tells him that was necessary to prevent Operation Aegis, as no one has figured out the truth yet, and the ones that come from other sectors have been deceived by Morimura. He adds that there's no coming back after total annihilation, and that was reason enough for him to take the job. A asks what job, and the voice tells him he was to retrieve information extracted from a certain data unit. Circumstances change, and that unit may jeopardize their escape, so he needs to destroy it, and it's hidden somewhere at Sakura High. It may be accompanied by Natsuno Minami from Class 1C. A asks if that's an order, and the voice says no, that he's just presenting options, as the situation must be dealt with in some fashion, and if it isn't, there's no turning back. The voice stops transmitting and he thinks about Natsuno, realizing that even if she doesn't have the unit, she'll know where it is. He doesn't trust the voice, but believes it to be the only chance to recover his memories, so he has to play along for now, and he'll pay a visit to the school after class tomorrow. We fade to black. We fade in to Event 170, where he shows up at the school front gate after class and sees a bandaged Natsuno tell Iori goodbye after they talk for a bit about Iori waiting for someone. Natsuno leaves and A, not recognizing her, doesn't stop her. He does go talk to Iori, and she says she was hoping he'd show up. She asks if everything's okay, and he says he owes her an apology. She gets sad, thinking he meant that he rejected her confession, and he quickly states that he lost his memory, so he was just pretending to know who she was yesterday. But he couldn't be honest because he doesn't know who his enemies are yet. He asks if he can trust her, and she says yes, but that is exactly what a person you can't trust would say. He says he needs her help, and she says she's happy to, but she's not happy he lied to her. She asks why he didn't tell her sooner, and he apologizes. She asks how he found her without his memories, and she says her student ID helped. She wonders aloud if having no memories means he doesn't remember her confession, and asks if there's anything he does remember, and he says no. He asks if she knows Natsuno, and she replies that Natsuno was just there and they were talking before he showed up. This annoys A as he realizes then that the girl in gym clothes is the one he was looking for, and she's probably gone by now. She asks if A knows her, and he says no, but then asks to look over the numbered note he's carrying around, but she doesn't recognize it. Miwako walks up and greets Iori. Miwako notices A and lets out a little squee of excitement before asking Iori if things are going well between them. Iori isn't sure, and Miwako asks if she got to first. Iori is surprised, and Miwako takes the hesitation to mean that maybe she went to second and tells her she's moving awfully fast. Iori asks if she's done, and Miwako realizes she's getting ahead of herself again. Miwako tells her to keep at it, and then asks about the paper. Iori tells her she's trying to figure out what the numbers are. Miwako takes a look and thinks she knows, so A asks her, and she says they look like they're for the telephone message service that recently started, and Iori recognizes the name as a service that lets you leave messages over the phone. Miwako adds that her mom uses it to leave messages for her when she works late, but then realizes she should get out of her hair before whispering encouragement to Iori and taking her leave. A thinks about the message servants, but then asks Iori if he told her about his memories, and she replies that he's been too busy popping up out of nowhere and not sticking around long enough to actually do that. But the last time she saw him, he looked like he had something to say, so maybe he was planning on telling her then. Megami walks by the couple without stopping, and Juro follows suit, saying goodbye to Iori as he walks, as A thinks that is Juro Izumi. The camera pans over to follow Juro as he tries to talk to Megami, but she just keeps walking. A recognizes him as a recipient of nanomachine treatment and the girl that aimed a gun at his head, so she's up to something. After a brief thought, he decides to follow the two of them. Iori asks where he's going, and he says there's something he has to do, and he runs off to a fade to black. Phew. We do have a new card. Unlike the last video, which had absolutely nothing whatsoever. The message service. And then we have to zoom in a bit here. Because the paper with that weird string of numbers that we've had this entire time is apparently for the message service. Video 89 begins with event 271, continuing on from the end of the last video, where A walks into the Kurabe house, noticing the nameplate and wonders if they live together. He notices the full dinner table is set for 3, and Megami calls out from the kitchen to Miura that dinner is ready. She walks into the living room and A pulls his gun on her after saying they meet again. Megami glares at him and he says that it's easy when you're holding the gun, but not so much when you're staring down the barrel. He says Megami said he asked her to shoot him and asked what that meant. She replies that it's what she was told. He asks who ordered her to shoot him and to tell him everything. Juro runs in and stands in the path of the gun while Megami calls for him to wait, and A says he shouldn't startle him like that unless he just wants to die. Juro asks him who he thinks he is and that he can't just barge into a house without permission. Juro then recalls that he shot the robot at Tokasaka Shrine, and A says this is between him and Megami and tells Izumi to stay out of it. Juro says he has it wrong as he's Juro Kurabe. A tells him that whoever he is, he needs to get out of the way, and after a brief pause, A just shoots Juro and Megami immediately checks on him. A says he's only stunned and not dead, and he still wants an explanation, and Megami tells him to ask for himself, as the brains behind everything is sitting on the TV, which is clear of everyone and anyone. A doesn't understand, but then a Fluffy appears out of thin air and remarks that they're doing this thing now. A refuses to believe that this is the talking cat and that there has to be a trick to it. Fluffy replies that the only trick is his unrivaled genius, and cats aren't stupid unlike humans, and especially him as he tried to ditch a Sentinel. Fluffy asks if he thought he could escape the game and scoffs at the notion. A asks him what he meant by game and if it's a fight against the kaiju. Fluffy confirms it and chides A for only thinking of running away, but he did come around eventually, probably because he learned some new information. A is confused and Fluffy says he means the unshakable truth, and that's why he came crawling back and begged Fluffy to put him back in the game. Fluffy clarifies that the gun Megami uses is a nanomachine injector, and as promised, Fluffy will let him back on the battlefield. A asks to clarify what running away meant, specifically if it meant trying to escape the world. Fluffy dismisses this with a "who knows," and A asks what new information was there. Fluffy explains surprise that A doesn't remember anything, and he can always ask, because the guy right behind him might know something. Keitaro then charges in and knocks A to the ground, asking him what the hell he thinks he's doing. Megami calls out Miura's name, and Miura is surprised the assailant is A, and A asks if she just said Miura, and we fade to black. We fade back into Event 28. We are now in a Sentinel hangar in 2064. A walks along catwalk until he catches up to android Tamao in front of a control panel. He asks if she is updating the data for Sentinel 17 as well, and says for all third-generation Sentinels. The monitor calls out Tamao's name, and she says she does not intend to report what it told her, but he needs to stop poking his nose where it doesn't belong. He replies he can't do that and needs a favor from her. If anything happens to him, he wants her to keep his line open. She sighs and says fine before walking away. A talks to the monitor, which proves to be AI Keitaro Miura, and tells him he saw Tamao at the Sentinel 18 lift and asks if she's from the future as well, and he replies she is Sentinel 18's pilot. A is confused as he thought only AI could pilot Sentinel 18. Keitaro sighs and notes that A didn't refer to him by number and referred to him by name. A said Keitaro did claim to be human once, and Keitaro is believed that A believes him. He then tells A he has matters to discuss, and A tells him he got serious and asks what it is, to which he replies that he wants to talk face to face, so A needs to raise the lift so they can't be disturbed. He does so and says it's the perfect view of his face as he turns to look at the Sentinel. Keitaro asks if he remembers the conversation about the mainframe, and A replies that it's a computer in the underground UFO. Keitaro says it was created in 2188, to which A replies it's even further in the future than Ida and the others. Keitaro is positive the era they came from, that is the era they came from, after analyzing the mainframe data and finding a massive report on 2188, though he only managed to decode a portion of it so far. When he completes it, he will know what started everything and maybe even find a way to save the world. But the data on the mainframe has been quarantined and made inaccessible, and he's positive Morimura was the one that did it because there are things she didn't want them to find out. A said he thought she was there to save the world, and Keitaro did too, but it seems there are ulterior motives at work. A says there has to be a way to access it, and Keitaro says that's impossible. He follows up by saying he's going to let A know something even Tamao doesn't, and there's one more data log copied to his brain. A realizes he created a backup and stored it in 17. Keitaro says he did, but he knows if Morimura finds it, she will erase it. A adds that she probably isn't the only one that wants it erased, and Keitaro said that's why he's asking for A's help. If the Sentinel suffers extensive damage, please recover the memory block at all costs. Keitaro says he'll be counting on A when the time comes, and A says he won't let Keitaro down. Keitaro asks what brought A here in the first place, and A says, well, he's upgrading the system. Keitaro asks kind of shakily if he and A are friends, and A reassures him that they are. Fade to black, and we go to be continued. Okay, we have a few things here to add in. Decent amount of strings, and well, a lot of them are going to one very specific spot. I'm pretty sure you can figure out what that spot is after what we just talked about here. Sentinel 18 sitting right there. We do have reference to an AI Takatoshi Hijiyama. I don't know at what point we are actually going to manage to make that do anything, but we do have reference to it now. We have a nanomachine injector. Go. Let's see. A at one point was the pilot for Sentinel 15, but he lost possession of it. He was the pilot in 2064. There's Okino. Okino. There we go. Okino and Sentinel 12 was the pilot and lost possession of it. Let's see, AI Keitaro Miura. Was the pilot as of Sentinel 17 in 2064. He lost possession. AI Tamao Karabe. Piloted Sentinel 18. And because we saw her die, she lost possession of that one. Let's see, Takatoshi Hijiyama as an AI. And this wasn't so much stated in the game, but this was something, this whole bit with Takatoshi here. It was kind of confirmed because the game does not go into it. And seeing things as they were, I kind of softly put it together. So Lantern kind of confirmed it at that point, that Takatoshi was the pilot of Sentinel 19 back in 2064. Then, at some point, A apparently begged Fluffy. Oh, that's kind of annoying. That was kind of annoying. I'll try to remember to cut that out. Let's see. A apparently begged Fluffy over here. I'm glad this saves fairly frequently. To let him rejoin the game. I accidentally hit the button on my mouse that goes backwards on the web page. Let me look real quick and make sure. Okay, yeah. And yes, I was watching a clip for Major Payne earlier. Go figure. Let's see. The nanomachine injector there. Is the purpose, the magic gun's purpose is to be a nanomachine injector here. So now I need to pull up the 2064 invasion. Because we're going to have a whole lot of strings attached to this. 12, number 13, number 14, 15, 17, because we do not know much about number 16 at this point. It's 12, 13, 14, 15, 17, 18. These three. And then we have 3 more attached to that. Let's see if I can find all these guys. There's Okino. He fought in 2064 in number 12. Jiro Izumi fought in number 13. Ryoko Shinonome fought in number 14. Number 15 was piloted by A. Sekigahara then. Don't know 16. Number 17. Where'd I put you? There you are. A.I. Keitaro Miura. He piloted number 17 there. A.I. Tamao Karabe, who piloted number 18 in that battle. And Number 19. Takatoshi Hijiyama there. Let's see. Then for the command structure for that. There we go. Let's see. Rinya was up on the rooftop acting in a command capacity. We had adult Tetsuya Ida acting as a command capacity there. And then we had good old Katsuta Hiro acting as command capacity. There we go. Video 89. And a lot of strings. Just a ton of strings that get pulled for that one. This brings us to video 90, where we begin with A in the same street he started out not too long ago. He pulls out the medical reports he's been hanging on to and reads through them, noting that Ryoko is taking 2 types of pills to delay nanomachine separation in the brain and apply a memory link enhancement, and lists the C0204 that A is also taking, and another pill named C22. The notes say it's been over a week since her last dose, so she must be suffering. He reads the file on Shu, and it says he was given NMA8076 one time, and that the sole note attached reads a 20% transplant rate. He reads the file on Juro Izumi and sees 2 types of treatment, the NMA8075 and B01. He got 4 doses of the A8075, then switched to B01 from the 5th dose on. B01 was synthesized by Tamao Kurabe. He pulls out the note and recalls that it has numbers for the message service, then goes to look for a phone booth. He spots a policeman and realizes it's just an ordinary cop, then reaches the phone booth that's currently occupied. While he waits, he thinks about other things, like why the person on the other side of the walkie-talkie keeps calling, if all he wanted was the information on BJ. He pulls out the phaser and thinks about how the futuristic android, meaning Tomi, also used one. Now, in musing about this, he actually does pull the thing out right in front of the policeman. So the cop sees this and asks what he was holding and demands to see it. He grabs the phaser, asks if it's a toy gun, and then says he's taking A in for questioning. A grabs the phaser back and runs off screen with the cop in pursuit. We fade to black. We fade back into event 268 on the timeline, and in the alley A woke up in next to the body of Nurse Morimura as A runs on screen. He managed to lose the cop, but sighs as he realizes he did all the running just to end up back where he started. He looks at where Morimura's body was and rationalizes the black suits must have already disposed of it. He thinks for a second and runs with the assumption that he did kill her, as the MIBs were already after him, so did he lure Morimura out there, and finds something isn't adding up. He remembers the clues he found before, but still hadn't figured out what they all mean. He pulls out the key and realizes that it has a button. He presses said button, and after a while, his Tron bike appears. When he wonders aloud if the key summoned the bike announces that the voice authentication is verified, and it requires a key to unlock. He's surprised at the voice activation and wonders if it's a self-driving motorcycle. He inserts the key, and the bike announces that it is unlocked, ready to accept voice commands, and asks him to set his next destination. He asks who the bike belongs to, and it says the registered drivers of the Shikishima SXR-NR are A. Sekigahara and Chihiro Morimura. He steps back in surprise at the second named and wonders if it might know where he's taken it in the past. He asks it to display the travel log, and it does. He notes that he's taken all around the city, but there were 2 places he's visited multiple times, Sakura High and one other spot. The bike asks if he would like to set that as his destination. He does, and then rides off to a fade to black. We fade back in as he drives along the Suwabuki bypass motorway and asks the bike if he left anything with it. The bike asks him to specify, and he asks if he left any messages. The bike announces there are 2 logs from A. Sekigahara. He requests the playback, and a window of himself pops up. He asks if he found it, and He asks if he found it, and his intuition was right, but he's leaving this message as a precaution if he loses his memory sooner than he expects. He has to acquire the 2188 data logs as part of what he needs to do to escape the world, and he can't let Chihiro Morimura execute Operation Aegis. He talks about the nurse position Sakura being under false pretenses, and he needs to stop her at all costs. The first log ends, and the second begins. He says his headaches are getting worse, so he's running out of time, but interesting developments have come up. He confirmed Iori was able to use the gate, and the log she left behind marked her ID as Chihiro Morimura's biometric ID, meaning that the two are one and the same. But knowing that, can he still stop Operation Aegis? That's the question, and he claims the answer is obvious without actually stating what the answer is. He drives off into a fade to black. Fade into event 269 in the timeline as A drives up to the Higoromocho abandoned factory alley that we saw earlier when Takatoshi tracked Okino down. The bike announces that the destination's been reached, and A wonders what he's going to find there. He walks up the nearby steps to try the door and finds it locked, but realizes he has to be there for this factory. After walking around for a bit, Takatoshi comes out of the door, walks down the stairs, and expresses surprise to see A there, and asks if he's going to cause more trouble. Takatoshi asks if something's wrong, but if he had to guess, A finally lost his memories. A is confused how he knows, and he replies that the way A is acting is kind of a dead giveaway, and it's a surprise he was even able to find his way back there. Okino, in the Kiriko Doji outfit, walks down the stairs, and A asks if they know what he was trying to do there. Okino calls it odd and pushes Takatoshi aside to talk to A. Okino gets in close to examine A asks who they are, and Okino says it didn't work and that 32% wasn't enough. Okino asks if A recognizes them, and A says he does not. Okino gets really close to A and tells him to focus, with a protest coming from Takatoshi at the move. Okino ignores this and tells A to take a good look at their face, because they know he can remember. We fade to black as the video ends. Okay. We have a few things to put here. There. Six. Got 227. Okay. And here we're going, a large part of this is going to be about the pills we talked about. Let's see, where is... There we go. Those apparently delayed nanomachine separation. Process of elimination is what leads me to fill most of these out the way I am filling them out right now. The whole list of things that A found off of the medical reports. And then we need one more card for the B01 pills. So let's see, I need to pull up Ryoko here to make sure I can see that. Good, get that up. Let's see, these pills we know Ryoko is taking. Taking the C0204. Also know Ryoko. is taking the C-22. So I can put that there. And we've got a shoe. Let's take in a 8076 pills once. Just Juro a bit more prominent here. Juro took 8075 pills a few times. And then ended up taking some B01 pills. And then over here we have AI to Malkarabe. Because we don't have any other Tamau Karabes in this area. Synthesize the B01 pills for Juro. And we've learned that that bicycle, Sekigahara's motorcycle, also has Chihiro Morimura as an authorized driver, which is weird. Before I completely forget here. There we go. We got the model number there now. That is all for video 90. So video 91 starts off with a continuation of the last video. We actually fade into event 36 and we see Okino running along a catwalk in the Ayami Pass factory hangar of 1944, followed closely by A. A calls for them to wait, then spots a sentinel in the hangar and stops. He muses about DD-426 and its virus-esque tendencies, and the pills that slow the effects of it. A walks in to get a better look at Sentinel 19 and recognizes, realizing that this is where it was transmitted. He continues to walk and Okino steps into view, calling him persistent and saying he got them. A says he knows it's Okino, who replies that he managed to catch them even in that outfit. A says that asked if they'd been hiding and laying low in Sector 5 since the incident, and Okino asks why A was searching for them. A wants to stop the effects of DD-426 and asks if they are the expert. Okino replies they are and notes that it's a code that was distributed on the battlefield and asks if A who knows who's responsible for spreading it. A doesn't, and Okino says this is exactly why they're in hiding, because they can't trust anyone, including A. A says Okino was on the battlefield, but it isn't showing the effects of DD-426. Okino says the same could be said for A, and A says he's taking pills to reduce the symptoms to Okino's surprise. A shows Okino the bottle, and Okino notes the pills serve as additional code for priority processing. A says the pills aren't going to save him, and Okino agrees, adding that he's just buying himself time. A says that Okino looks completely healthy, so there must be a way to stop it. Okino says that's impossible and continues to say that a year ago, they discovered a code created by 426 named DD-426. Okino, in all his wisdom, tested it on themselves to detach the D-code, and it resulted in the loss of their memories, so they were unaffected on the battlefield. A says it doesn't seem like they've lost any memories at all, and Okino replies that they transferred their memories to the nanomachines to create a simulated personality that makes up their identity. A asks if this means there are programs simulating Okino, and Okino says that at first it was, but now they've been affixed to the brain. They are the true Tsukasa Okino, as they possess the original Okino's personality and memories to the point that no one can tell the difference. A says they're still not the same, and the Okino from before was, well, different. Okino replies that humans are constantly evolving, and regardless of retained memories, we're never quite the same as our past selves. Okino takes advantage of the following pause to tell A his pursuit of them caused quite the panic, and Professor Doji wants to have them restrained, so now that A has caught them, maybe it's time to give up. But before that can happen, Okino perks up and calls out to Takatoshi now that they're over here and they need help. Takatoshi runs up, asks what's going on, and Okino hides behind Takatoshi, pointing out A. Takatoshi asks who the hell that is, and Okino asks Takatoshi to make A go away. Okino runs off, A tries to follow, but Takatoshi blocks the path and says A is coming with him for seeing too much classified material. A runs off, and Takatoshi gives chase, and we fade to black. Now, we fade back in to return to Event 269 from the previous video in this series. We return and we see A still up close with Okino as Takatoshi glares at both of them. A finally recognizes Okino, how they met in Sector 5, and that they're an AI construct of sorts. Okino asks that all because he's missing some very important details. Okino gets back up close to A's face and tries again. Takatoshi asks if they have to stand that close, and Okino says never mind the jealousy before staring down A and asks him to remember why he kept coming back. Excuse me. We fade to black again for another flashback. We fade back into Event 188 in the timeline, and the interior of the factory, where A and Takatoshi are standing in front of a floodlight. Takatoshi asks how he's feeling, and A says his head's about to split in half. Takatoshi asks about the pills, and A says they aren't working anymore. Takatoshi says he's taken so many already, and is surprised they're completely ineffective. Okino walks in from off screen, saying they're ready to go before activating some floating panels. Okino pauses to ask him why, if he was so reluctant to go through with this process before, he's now reliant on the plan, so what exactly changed your mind? A says nothing changed his mind, he still thinks this is terrible, but there are things he doesn't want to forget, like Okino's vile face. Okino snidely says they'll be sure to preserve that memory especially for him. A asks for the step walkthrough, and Okino replies at first they'll input a memory extraction code into A, so his memories can be saved at any time. The consciousness, though, won't be saved. Then the simulated personality will, and gets cut off as A interrupts him to say all he needs is his memory saved, as he doesn't want an AI taking him over. Okino says the simulated personality will think the same way he does, working together and supporting his own brain. It'll be a symbiotic relationship, teaching his brain new ways to think and solve problems, but A will still be in charge of decision making. And after what we've seen so far, I would be kind of with A at this point, just to say, because I don't really think Okino is all that trustworthy as a scientist. Just saying. I mean, he's made some really, really dumb things. Anyway, A admits he hates himself and doesn't need a simulated personality. Okino says alright, and they'll just extract his memories. Okino continues that his memories will be stored in his nanomachines and configured so that when the decode region detaches, the memories will be backed up, and they'll require an intracerebral map to save his memories, but it'll be pointless if he ends up as a husk. Okino says A's brain had more damage than anticipated, and their equipment can only do so much, and can only map 30% of the region per scan, so this is going to take multiple trips. They get started as A takes a seat and dons a funky freaking helmet that would not look out of place in the 1950s Back to the Future or in the beginning scenes of Ghostbusters. Okino starts creating the intracerebral map by doing word exercises and asks A to list any words beginning with A that come to mind. and to imagine the object in his mind as he says it. He lists off apple, asphalt, and anchor as the scene fades out, and most of us think asshole and picture Okino's face, but sadly, A does not do this with us. And we fade out to be continued. Let's see here. We have a new card for an actual person here. And this, I am perfectly willing to admit I could be wrong about where some of the things I'm about to put down are. There are only two strings, both of them featuring Okino. I can barely see. Let's go ahead and get both of these on there. First things first, I need to go up here. Okino tested DD426 on himself, like a smart person apparently. And then, the way I read what happened there was he managed to get a hold of the memories 2188 and implemented those into himself. And there we go. We now have... save on that. We now have the last session kinda, sorta recapped. I know, these are long videos. I pause many times during the recording of them to keep from getting a very sore throat. Because that's like an hour 46 minutes this time. But anyway, that will be all for this time. I'll be back in about 3 weeks probably or so with the next recap when we get that many videos done. So until then, take care everyone.